He was the only black student on the debate team, until the principal locked him out minutes before nationals and gave his speech to a white student. Cameras rolled. Applause erupted. No one knew the truth, until the mic caught something it wasn't supposed to. And when the footage leaked, the school's darkest secret unraveled live on air. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The wind outside Liam Tallbear's window howled like a wounded spirit, an echo of something older than pain, older than memory. Inside his cramped bedroom on the Pine Ridge Reservation, the yellow light of a desk lamp cast long, wavering shadows across peeling wallpaper and a thin mattress. The air was stale with late-night sweat, and the kind of silence that only comes from generations of being told to be quiet. But Liam wasn't quiet tonight. His pen scraped furiously across the lined notebook page, every stroke like a strike against something invisible yet suffocating. His dark eyes, wide and wild, flicked between the growing paragraphs and the single sentence scrawled at the top of the page. Essay topic: What does freedom mean to you? To most of his classmates at MacArthur High, freedom meant college, or cars, or the right to say what you want without getting cancelled on social media. To Liam it meant something far more complicated, and far more dangerous. He dipped the pen again. Words poured out like blood from a reopened wound. Freedom never meant shelter. Our ancestors froze during forced relocations, while white families warmed their homes with our stolen timber. Freedom never meant language. Our tongues were ripped from our mouths by boarding schools that called our ways savage. Freedom never meant safety. Our women go missing. Our boys are criminalized, and no Amber Alert screams for us. Liam paused. His hand trembled slightly, but not from fatigue, from truth, from the weight of saying what no one wanted to read. His walls were lined with images. His grandfather in traditional Lakota regalia, a smudged photo of the Wounded Knee Memorial, and a cracked mirror that somehow made him look smaller every year. In that moment, the essay was no longer an assignment. It was testimony. It was his grandfather's silence turned into language. It was a middle finger to the weight that pressed on his chest every time someone at school asked if he still lived in a teepee. A drop of sweat slid down the bridge of his nose and splattered on the paper. He ended the final paragraph with a line that had arrived like thunder. Freedom never knocked on our doors. It just walked past. He stared at the sentence. Read it again. Then once more. It rang so painfully true. He almost hated it. The next morning, Liam folded the paper neatly, placing it in a tattered blue folder. He slipped on his worn sneakers, kissed his mother's cheek, and walked out the door before the sun had finished rising. His mother, Sherilyn, watched from the doorway, holding her coffee like a shield. She knew that look on his face. It was the same one her father had worn when testifying before tribal council in 1987. That look meant truth was coming, and pain wouldn't be far behind. At school, the fluorescent lights of MacArthur High buzzed like angry insects. Liam walked the hallways like he always did, shoulders slightly hunched, avoiding eye contact. He passed students with varsity jackets and vape pens, who either ignored him completely or nodded with that fake politeness reserved for token diversity. He reached room 204. Mrs. West's English class. She was already there, all starched blouse and forced smiles, sipping from a mug that read, "Grading is my love language." Liam approached her desk and held out the folder. "Here's my essay," he said quietly. Mrs. West took it without looking at him. "Thank you, Liam. Let's hope it's more on topic this time." That stung. Last semester he'd written about the loss of tribal languages. She gave it a C- and called it too niche. He nodded and sat at his desk, biting the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted metal. 2 days later, the grades were posted on the classroom wall. Students crowded around, laughing, comparing marks. Liam walked up slowly. He scanned the list, tracing each name until he found his. Tallbear, Liam. F. Too emotionally biased. See me after class. His stomach dropped so fast it felt like gravity had betrayed him. Behind him, someone snorted. Guess essays don't count as war dances. He turned, fists clenched, but remembered what his mother always said. They want you angry. Make them uncomfortable with your calm instead. Class began. The words of The Great Gatsby faded into static in his mind as he sat in his seat, staring at the red F marked on the returned paper. It was underlined twice, like it was screaming. The bell rang. Mrs. West straightened her skirt and called him to her desk. He approached slowly, placing the essay in front of her. You wanted to see me? He asked. She gave a tight, almost sympathetic smile. Liam, I read your essay. It was passionate. I can see you care deeply about your heritage. But we have to grade based on structure, tone, and balance. Balance? Liam echoed, voice low. Yes. Your paper was very one-sided. Very angry. You need to remember we live in a country that's offered you opportunities. Focusing only on negativity doesn't help anyone. Liam's face remained calm, but his hands trembled beneath the desk. It wasn't negativity. It was my life. And I respect that. But education requires neutrality. Objectivity. You need to learn how to separate emotion from argument. He nodded slowly, stepping back, the air thick between them. I see. Liam, she added. If you want, I'll allow you to rewrite it. Maybe focus on the progress your people have made instead. Highlight some of the positives. His chest tightened. The floor felt farther away than usual. My people don't get to write about freedom. As if we ever had it, he whispered. She frowned. That's exactly the kind of exaggeration that weakens your argument. He turned to leave. Liam, think about the rewrite, she called after him. It could help your grade, and your future. He paused at the door. And then he said it, voice steady, eyes burning. I don't want to rewrite history just to make it easier for you to read. Her lips parted, as if to reply. But no sound came. Liam walked out of room 204, heart pounding, essay still clutched in his hand. As he reached the stairwell, he heard a group of students laughing. One held up a phone. A meme flashed across the screen. A caricature of a Native American man, holding an F paper with the caption, Freedom of Failure. They didn't even realize he was the punchline. Liam pushed through the doors, cold wind slapping his face, eyes brimming with something not quite tears, not quite rage. He thought of trashing the essay, of letting it die like so many voices before his. But that night, as he sat at the same desk under the same dim light, Elijah, his older cousin, knocked gently and entered. I read it, Elijah said, holding a copy of the essay he'd found in Liam's bag. Liam looked up, startled. You weren't supposed to. I had to. Because it's the most honest thing I've ever read. Elijah paused. You need to post this. People need to see it. Liam shook his head. They already failed it. Elijah leaned forward, eyes fierce. That's exactly why they need to read it. And then, as if the universe was listening, Liam's cracked phone buzzed. A notification. A comment. A DM from someone he didn't recognize. Is this your essay circulating on Reddit? People think it's AI written. No way a team wrote this. If it is yours, you've started something. Liam froze, because he hadn't posted it. He turned to Elijah, who avoided his gaze. What did you do? Liam asked. But the answer would upend everything. Liam stood in the corner of Mrs. West's classroom, the returned essay clenched in his hand like a verdict too cruel to read again. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with the same coldness as the woman seated at the desk, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, as she flipped through a rubric she had likely memorized years ago. Liam, I've given your essay a lot of thought, she began, setting down her pen with an exaggerated sigh. But we need to talk about the tone. It was angry, very angry, and frankly politically divisive. Her words fell like stones into the space between them. Liam didn't respond. He was still trying to process the slap of the red F across his truth. You say freedom never knocked on your door? She continued. That's a strong accusation. You live in a country that provides opportunity, education, the ability to speak freely. Shouldn't that count for something? Her voice tilted upward in faux warmth, but Liam heard the chill behind the words, heard what she wasn't saying out loud. That he should be grateful. That silence was the price of his seat in this school. That truth had to be wrapped in ribbons to be acceptable. He blinked once, slowly, as heat began to spread through his chest. You asked what freedom meant to me, he said, barely above a whisper. I told you. She leaned back, folding her arms like she was lecturing a stubborn child. But there's a difference between personal experience and productive dialogue. Your essay didn't build bridges. It lit fires. Liam met her gaze then. Her eyes were pale, careful, but beneath them, he saw it, fear disguised as concern. You want me to build a bridge with people who don't believe I should exist, he said, voice tightening. You want me to rewrite truth so it doesn't make you uncomfortable. Mrs. West sighed again, tapping her nails on the desk now. I want you to learn that emotion without perspective is just noise. You're smart, Liam, but no one listens to rage. If you want a higher grade, you'll need to rewrite it from a more balanced lens. Talk about what's changed, how far we've come. Don't just dwell on the pain. Her tone was rehearsed, almost pitying. But it stabbed at something deep inside him. Liam's mouth went dry. He thought of the faces of his relatives. His uncle who died of liver failure in a trailer with no clean water. His aunt who was still looking for her daughter, missing 3 years now. He thought of the school hallway that ignored his presence, the textbooks that called native history ancient, and the jokes that never ended, not even after they left bruises on his soul. He thought of being told to rewrite his grief, so it could be more comfortable for readers who had never once tasted it. Balanced, he repeated. You mean watered down? She blinked, thrown by the directness. I'm offering you a chance, Liam. Take it. His breath caught, his teeth clenched, but instead of answering he turned and walked out quietly, respectfully, just like they'd taught him. That evening, back at home, the reservation air smelled of sage and dry grass. The windows rattled softly in the breeze, and the sky above was painted in streaks of orange and deep blue. Sherilyn Talbert stood over a pot of stew, stirring slowly, her brow furrowed. Liam sat at the kitchen table, the essay lying between them like a fresh wound. She picked it up and began to read. Her eyes moved slowly, methodically. With each line her grip on the paper tightened. When she reached the end, her lips parted but no words came. Instead, tears fell silently down her cheeks, dropping onto the edge of the paper. I didn't know you carried all of this, she whispered. You're 17, and you're already carrying ghosts. Liam didn't look up. I wasn't supposed to say any of it out loud. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found his. You said it the way our people always had to, like truth was something you had to dig from the ground with bare hands. Later that night, Elijah came by, a beat-up laptop under one arm, and a fire in his eyes. He was Liam's older cousin, 5 years deep into community activism, and never without a protest flyer in his backpack. He'd read the essay too. Sherilyn had handed it to him with reverence, like sacred text. This isn't just good, he said, sitting across from Liam. It's necessary. Liam shrugged. Didn't to her. I failed. Elijah shook his head. Of course it didn't matter to her. It wasn't written for her. But it was written for us. For every kid who's been told to tone it down. For every student who got an F for being real. He opened the laptop. Let's post it, anonymously. I'll put it on my blog. Just let people read it, man. No name, no face. Let the words speak. Liam hesitated, staring at the screen. I don't know, Eli. What if it just disappears? Or worse, what if no one cares? Elijah smiled, bitter and bright. Then we go down swinging. But I have a feeling this won't disappear. And so, with Sherilyn's silent nod and Liam's reluctant breath, the essay was uploaded under a new title, What Freedom Never Meant for Us. A simple black and white post. No photo, no author bio, just raw truth, waiting like a match, near dry grass. They went to bed unsure if anyone would ever read it. But the internet has a strange way of finding what it isn't supposed to see. By sunrise, Elijah's phone had 89 notifications. The blog post had been shared over 2,000 times, retweeted by a university professor, linked by a small activist news site, and reposted by a viral TikTok creator with millions of followers. By mid-morning it was at 40,000 shares and counting. Comments poured in from around the world, some in solidarity, some in disbelief. A Harvard graduate student called it the most urgent essay I've read this decade. A retired Marine wrote, I never thought about it like this. I served a country that failed these kids. Liam, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, read the comments in stunned silence. His heart pounded, not with pride, but with a strange mix of fear and disbelief. How is this real? He asked. Elijah laughed, clapping him on the back. You lit the match, cousin. Now watch it burn. But just as Liam began to smile, a new message popped up in Elijah's inbox. An email from a company he never expected. Subject, authorship confirmation. Google AI Youth Initiative request. And in the body of the message, a single line, we believe the essay posted last night was not AI generated. If the author is human, we need to talk immediately. Liam's alarm buzzed at 6:15 a.m., but he was already awake. He hadn't really slept. How could he? His phone lit up in bursts throughout the night, buzzing with mentions, comments, and retweets that grew more surreal with every hour. He sat on the edge of his bed, hoodie pulled over his head, thumbing through hundreds of messages that blurred the line between reality and something far bigger than himself. Whoever wrote this, I see you. This essay just changed my perspective on everything. Why aren't we reading voices like this in schools? College professors were sharing quotes. TikTok activists were creating video essays with voiceovers from the text. One post featured Liam's final line, "Freedom never knocked on our doors. It just walked past," superimposed on an image of a chained boarding school gate. Over 1 million views. Elijah barged in without knocking. Eyes wild. "Dude, it's everywhere." CNN just tweeted a screenshot. They tagged the blog. He waved his phone like a torch. Liam's heart skipped. "CNN?" he croaked, voice dry from nerves. "No one even knows who wrote it," Elijah said, pacing. "That's what's making it go viral. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and no one can put a face to it. It feels like it could be from any native kid, like it speaks for all of us." Liam's stomach twisted. That was the problem. It was from someone. And the longer the lie held, the harder it would hit when the truth surfaced. "What if this gets out of control?" he asked, voice small. "What if it turns into something we can't undo?" Elijah froze and looked at him. "Then, let it. The system's never been afraid of our silence. Only our voice." But Liam wasn't sure anymore. 100,000 shares could feel like applause. Or exposure. Especially when no one at school knew yet. By second period, the walls of MacArthur High buzzed with the same viral energy as Liam's phone. Students whispered about that essay everyone's talking about, passing around phones, screenshots, and conspiracy theories. "I think it was written by a college student," one sophomore said in the hallway. "No way someone our age wrote that." "Bet it was AI," another shrugged. "Too smart. Probably fake." In English class, Liam sat rigid at his desk while Mrs. West wrote "Freedom and Perspective" on the whiteboard, her marker squeaking with artificial enthusiasm. She turned, smiling that tight, practiced smile. "I assume by now some of you have seen the online essay going around, the one about native oppression." The class murmured, a few nodding. Liam's hands curled into fists under the desk. Mrs. West chuckled lightly. "It's quite dramatic, full of emotional punches, but sorely lacking in academic structure. Lots of resentment, half-truths." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "It's exactly the kind of rhetoric that inflames people but doesn't educate them." Liam stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. She was talking about him, mocking him. The same essay she failed was now being dissected without his name, without his defense. His soul was being held up like a sample in a museum, an artifact stripped of its maker. Later, in the cafeteria, someone read the essay out loud from their phone, surrounded by a small circle of students. "This part hit me," one girl said, reading, "We were not invited to the American dream. We were warned to stay silent outside its gates." "Yo, whoever wrote that is legit," someone else added. Liam grabbed his tray and sat far from them, his back turned like he could disappear into the plastic seats and linoleum floor. It wasn't just about the essay anymore. It was about being invisible while everyone dissected his truth, like it was literature instead of life. After school, Elijah met him at the edge of the football field, where kids screamed and sprinted and practiced touchdowns, while Liam watched like he was on another planet. Elijah was grinning. "You're not gonna believe this." He handed over his phone. On screen was a message from Indigenous Rising News, a national digital platform amplifying Native voices. The message was simple: "We want to feature this essay on our homepage. It's sparked national discussion. Can we publish it officially?" Liam's breath hitched. His name wasn't on the post, but it was his voice. "Do I say yes?" Elijah asked. "This could change everything. This isn't just going viral, it's becoming a movement." But Liam didn't answer right away. He watched the field, the sunset dipping low over the prairie grass in the distance. Something inside him felt torn. He hadn't even told his mom yet, and now his story was on the verge of becoming public property. "What if it backfires?" he asked, almost to himself. "What if the school finds out? What if Mrs. West uses it against me?" Elijah didn't reply. For once he didn't have a ready answer. That night, Liam sat at his desk again, staring at his essay on the screen. Now reblogged, retweeted, and reshared over 400,000 times. Sherilyn walked in quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I heard," she said. "It's going big, huh?" He nodded. "I didn't expect this." She gave a faint smile. "You told the truth. Truth doesn't sit still, it echoes." She paused, then added gently, "But echoes can turn into storms, baby. You ready for that?" He didn't answer. The next morning, Elijah's email pinged again. It was from a different sender, an official one. Subject verification request. Google AI Youth. Writing Initiative. Body. We are tracking an anonymous essay shared online and widely attributed to an AI. After deeper forensic analysis, we believe this piece is human-written and one of the most emotionally resonant youth essays of the decade. We are requesting immediate contact with the author. Confidentiality guarantee. Liam read the message 3 times. The company wasn't just curious. They were sure it wasn't AI. They thought someone wrote it, and they wanted to know who. Elijah turned slowly to Liam and asked, "You still want to stay invisible?" Liam didn't answer, but somewhere deep in his chest, a clock had started ticking, and time was running out. By Thursday morning, Liam Talbert's name was still nowhere on the essay, but his words were everywhere. In lecture halls at UCLA, a professor opened class with his final paragraph. On Twitter, the quote, "Freedom never knocked on our doors, it just walked past," was paired with images of indigenous protests, land acknowledgements, and broken treaties. On Instagram, creators were reading excerpts in soft voices, layered over clips of pipeline protests and empty reservation classrooms. The hashtag #GenVoicelessNoMore exploded. Within 48 hours, the essay had become a rallying cry, not just for Native students, but for every marginalized voice that had been graded down for being too real. At MacArthur High, the air shifted. Students scrolled through their phones during class. Screens flickered with snippets of the essay, read aloud on podcasts, quoted in think pieces, debated in classrooms nationwide. No one at the school knew who wrote it yet. But the timing was suspicious. The topic, the voice, the fact that a Native student had just failed an essay on the exact same subject. Rumors stirred like wildfire in dry grass. Liam walked through the halls feeling like a ghost in his own body, noticed, but unnamed. He kept his hood up, earbuds in, pretending the sound wasn't rising around him, but it was. A girl from the school newspaper cornered him in the cafeteria. "Hey, you're Native, right? People think it might have been you. Is it true?" He didn't answer, just grabbed his tray and walked away. He wasn't ready. Not yet. In English class, Mrs. West was visibly tense. The lines around her mouth were tighter, her sentences clipped. Today, she began, "We'll discuss how rhetoric can manipulate emotion. Take, for example, the anonymous viral essay circulating online. Deeply emotional, yes, but lacking in academic discipline." She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. She was on edge, speaking louder than usual, her voice defensive even when no one was challenging her. Liam sat at his desk, face calm but insides twisting. Every time she dismissed the essay, he heard her dismiss his existence. And what hurt more, some students nodded along. After class, Elijah waited for him outside the building, leaning against the railing, arms crossed, the wind tugging at his coat. "You can't keep letting her shape the story," he said. "They're already talking. People want to know who wrote it. They need to know it came from a real person. Someone who knows what it means." Liam hesitated, shifting his weight. "Once I put my name on it, I can't take it back." "Exactly," Elijah replied. "That's why it matters." That night, Liam sat at the kitchen table, his fingers hovering over his phone. His Twitter account had exactly 38 followers, mostly cousins and res friends. It wasn't where viral things started, but this tweet wouldn't need hashtags, clever lines, or a thread. It only needed truth. He typed, "I wrote the essay you failed." Then hit post. That was all. Nothing more. Nothing less. Within minutes it caught fire. Activist accounts shared it. A journalist from The Guardian quote-tweeted it with the words, "We found him." Major influencers reposted the tweet, adding their own commentary. "And this is why we listen to young people." Within hours, Liam went from a whisper to a thunderclap. The tweet passed 1 million impressions before midnight. Media requests flooded his DMs. Anonymous no more. By morning, Liam was the lead story on digital news outlets. His essay was no longer just a viral artifact. It had a face, a name, a school, a story, and people wanted answers. At MacArthur High, students walked the halls in silence that Friday, dressed in red and black, the colors of the Lakota flag. Some wore duct tape over their mouths. Others carried signs with Liam's words written in marker. "We were not invited to the American dream." The entire second period passed without a single student speaking aloud. A silent protest. A classroom full of quiet rage. Mrs. West didn't come to school that day. Liam sat in the back of biology, barely hearing the lecture over the weight of everything that had shifted overnight. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was public property. Admired, dissected, resented. His name was trending. His story was being shared, but inside, the pressure built like a balloon begging to pop. Everyone had an opinion on him, and most of them had never met him. During lunch, he sat in the library, eyes on the floor, earbuds in. Elijah texted him, "They're talking about you on NPR right now." Holy shit. Liam didn't reply. He just stared at the wall, letting the sound of silence fill him back up. His chest felt tight. His name felt heavier than he'd ever imagined. He missed being unknown. Just a kid from the reservation, who wrote in notebooks and didn't have to answer to the world. Then his phone buzzed again. A message from the school office. "Please report to Principal McGovern's office immediately." Liam stood up slowly, heart thudding. He walked the empty hallway like he was headed to sentencing. When he reached the office, the receptionist didn't meet his eyes, just pointed toward the closed door. He knocked once. A voice answered, "Come in." Inside, Principal McGovern sat behind his oak desk, glasses in hand. Beside him stood two men in uniform, local police. Not in riot gear, just standard badges, radio clips, and those expressions that said they were used to walking into rooms that smelled of trouble. Liam froze in the doorway. His throat dried up. Principal McGovern cleared his throat. "Mr. Tallbear, have a seat. We've received some concerns regarding recent events." Liam didn't move. One of the officers reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, and placed something on the table, a printed copy of Liam's essay, highlighted and underlined in red. "We need to talk about this, son." Liam sat motionless, the tips of his fingers pressed together as his eyes flicked from the printed copy of his essay, highlighted, annotated, dissected like a crime scene, to the two uniformed officers standing just feet away. The room felt thick with silence, the kind that wasn't peaceful but loaded. Principal McGovern, always a mild-mannered man, who wore his discomfort like an ill-fitting blazer, tried to soften the moment. "Liam," he began, "we're not saying you did anything illegal." One of the officers, a tall man with buzzed hair and a stiff jawline, cut in. "But your essay has had consequences. There's unrest in the student body. Faculty feel unsafe. Tensions are running high." The other officer nodded. "You're not in trouble yet, but we've been asked to determine if your actions meet the threshold for creating a hostile school environment." Liam blinked. "You're telling me I caused hostility because I wrote the truth?" His voice was steady, but inside, the weight of fear curled like smoke in his lungs. Principal McGovern leaned forward, hands clasped. "You have to understand the broader impact. Teachers are being harassed online. Parents are calling the district. This school is under a spotlight right now." Liam swallowed. "I didn't tell anyone to protest. I didn't organize anything. I wrote." The room was still. One of the officers, scanning the marked-up essay, said, "Freedom never knocked on our doors. It just walked past. That's inflammatory, don't you think?" Liam's lips parted in disbelief. "That's my life." Before anyone could respond, the office door slammed open. Sherilyn Tallbear, fiery eyes framed by braids and storm clouds, marched in like a mother grizzly, with nothing left to lose. "Step away from my son," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried the weight of generations. Principal McGovern stood up, stammering. "Mrs. Tallbear, you called the cops because my child wrote an essay." She snapped. "Did you call the cops when students brought Confederate flags to school events? When they mocked his regalia at Culture Day? Or when his locker was vandalized with racial slurs in sophomore year? And no one did a damn thing. No one spoke." The room shrank in her presence. "You never cared about hostile environments until a native kid got hurt." One of the officers tried to step in. "Ma'am, please." She turned on him with that same fire. "No. You listen. My son bled truth onto that page. You think your discomfort is violence? Try silence. Try watching your culture shoved into footnotes. Try watching your kid get called a savage by teachers who smile when they say it. And now, because the world heard him, you threaten suspension. You threaten him with police." The other officer cleared his throat, suddenly sheepish. "It's not an arrest. It's just protocol. We were asked to evaluate risk. He's a child." Her voice cracked there, raw and real. "He's a kid who told the truth. That's not risk. That's a gift." Liam couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe what was happening. He looked down at the essay again, the red ink now burning holes into the page. This wasn't about words anymore. This was about power, and power, when threatened, always punished. That afternoon, students caught wind of the confrontation. Someone had recorded part of it through the office door. A blurry video. But Sherilyn's voice was unmistakable. The clip hit Twitter and TikTok within minutes. The caption read, "They called the cops because a native teen told the truth. Listen to his mom go off." It exploded. News outlets picked it up. Mother defends student after viral essay leads to police involvement. Activist circles reposted it. Non-stop. Comments flooded in. "This is what institutional racism looks like." Her voice gave me chills. Protect Liam Talbert at all costs. And underneath it all, the essay kept spreading. It was no longer just words on a page. It had become a battle line. That evening, as dusk painted the reservation in cold shadows, Liam sat on the porch beside his mother, their silence a shared breath. She reached over, placing her hand gently on his. "You didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "Don't let them shrink you." He nodded slowly, unsure if he believed it. His shoulders still carried the weight of that room, that scrutiny, those uniformed men standing like truth was a threat. Inside, Elijah burst through the front door, breathless. "Turn on the TV right now." Sherilyn rushed inside. Liam followed. They flipped on the local news, but Elijah was already streaming a live feed on his phone. A conference stage. A podium with the Google logo. A woman stood there, dressed in a sleek suit, speaking into a microphone. "We've been following the viral youth essay that has captivated the internet, initially believed to be AI generated due to its quality and intensity," she said. "After internal verification and direct contact with the author, we can now confirm that this essay was written by a 17-year-old Indigenous student from South Dakota." Liam's heart stopped. It is with great pride that Google announces, "We will be featuring his work, titled What Freedom Never Meant for Us, at our upcoming National Conference on Equity and Technology in Education. We believe this to be the most important youth voice of the decade." Sherilyn gasped. Elijah whooped, nearly dropping his phone. Liam sat down slowly, as if gravity had shifted. His essay, the same one that got him failed, ridiculed, and interrogated, was about to be read on the world stage. But just as Elijah refreshed his feed, a breaking news alert flashed across the screen. MacArthur High District faces lawsuit from parents over indoctrinating essay. Demands for author's expulsion grow. Liam Talbert woke up to an email with a blue and red Google header, and a subject line that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Formal invitation. Google Equity Conference. Youth keynote and recognition. The message was warm, reverent, and impossible to believe. They were flying him to California. All expenses paid. Hotel, travel, VIP badge. He'd speak alongside researchers, tech leaders, educators, and his essay would close the main session. The signature at the bottom bore the name of a senior vice president, followed by 3 words, "You've inspired us." Liam read it twice before whispering the words out loud to his mom, who stood barefoot at the doorway in stunned silence. "They really want me?" she asked. "Baby, they see you." For a fleeting moment, Liam felt the beginnings of something he hadn't tasted in years. Maybe ever. Validation. Not just from a screen or a headline, but from a world that had always seemed off-limits. The essay that once earned him an F was now the reason he'd be stepping onto a global stage. But across town, the reaction was anything but celebratory. MacArthur High's Facebook page flooded with furious comments from local parents. The word radical appeared so often, it started to lose meaning. "That boy disrespected his country. Kids are impressionable. This is dangerous. If he hates America so much, he should leave." The loudest voices came from the same community leaders who praised free speech when their kids mocked immigrants and waved Confederate flags at pep rallies. By noon, a petition titled, "Remove Liam Talbert for Dividing Our School" had over 600 signatures. Liam read every word. Some names he recognized. Classmates' parents. Even a few teachers. "He's making our kids feel guilty for being white. This is a high school, not a political arena. He doesn't represent us." The final comment cut the deepest. "Ungrateful reservation trash." Liam didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat in the back of Elijah's truck that night, staring at the endless Dakota fields slipping past under moonlight, his voice a whisper. "They don't want the truth. They just want peace and quiet, even if it means we choke on it." Elijah pulled over, the engine humming. "You think Rosa Parks wasn't called disruptive? You think Dr. King didn't make people uncomfortable? You just made the world look at us different. Liam, they're not mad because you lied. They're mad because you didn't." Meanwhile, Mrs. West broke her silence. She appeared on Dakota Voices Live, a conservative local radio show hosted by a former school board member. I've dedicated 23 years of my life to education, she began, her voice measured, almost wounded, and now I'm being called a racist because I tried to uphold academic standards. I've received death threats. I can't even go to the grocery store without someone whispering behind my back. Is this what justice looks like now? The host nodded solemnly. It's cancel culture, Caroline. You were just doing your job. She continued. It was a well-written essay, sure, but it lacked objectivity. It was written to provoke, not to educate. I gave him a chance to revise, but he chose to go viral instead. By the next morning, that interview was clipped, memed, and broadcast nationally. Activists called her tone dismissive and weaponized. Her defenders painted her as the real victim, an educator sacrificed to political correctness. Sherilyn listened to it on the kitchen radio and shook her head. She still thinks our pain is optional. Liam said nothing. Days later, 2 cars pulled into the dusty lot near the Tallbear home. Out stepped 2 sharply dressed Google reps. Tessa Langston, a black executive from Atlanta, and Javier Mora, a Mexican-American head of youth outreach. They didn't come with cameras or reporters, just suits, smiles, and open hearts. They shook Liam's hand like he was someone. Not a project, not a token, not a problem. We're not here to make you a mascot, Tessa said plainly. We're here because your words cracked something open, and we believe the world needs to hear you say them. Javier nodded. The most powerful stories are the ones that aren't supposed to be told. And yours? It's all of ours. But even as Liam offered them coffee inside, Elijah's phone buzzed. Outside MacArthur High, a protest had gathered.
Not students, not allies.
Parents. Signs waved in the air. No more woke indoctrination. Protect our kids. We stand with Mrs. West. Some shouted through bullhorns. Others marched across the school's parking lot, demanding Liam's removal, waving American flags like shields. When Google's team drove through town later that day, their rental car was spit on at a stoplight. One woman shouted, "Take your communist trash and go back to California." The reps said nothing, but their eyes changed. That evening, Liam returned to school for the first time since the protest, not because he felt safe, but because he refused to vanish. He walked the hallways in silence. Some students looked away, others stared, a few nodded, eyes quietly proud, but the walls whispered. He approached his locker slowly, stomach twisting. Something was off. The hallway was unusually empty, quiet in a way that buzzed beneath the skin. And then he saw it, scrawled in thick black marker across his locker door. Go back to the res. Below it, someone had drawn a crude caricature. Long hair, feathers, buck teeth. Next to it, "You don't belong here." Liam froze. The air disappeared from his lungs. His hands trembled. A lump formed in his throat, but didn't rise. He reached out, not to open the locker, but to touch the message, as if it would prove this wasn't just another nightmare in a long series of them. But the marker smudged beneath his finger. It was real. Behind him a camera clicked. A student. Recording. Liam didn't turn around. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his brown skin, his last name, his history, all smeared across a metal door like a warning. As he walked away, a folded note slid out from the vents of the locker, landing softly on the floor. Elijah picked it up, opened it and stared, his face draining of color. He handed it to Liam, who read the single line written in red pen. "You were never supposed to be heard." The morning after Liam found the slur on his locker, silence followed him like a shadow. But by evening it was replaced by something far darker. The first email came through his school inbox, unsigned, the subject line blank. The message was short, just 6 words typed in all caps, "You won't make it to Google." At first, Liam stared at it, numb. He showed Elijah, who brushed it off as a troll, but there was a tremble in his voice he didn't hide well. The next morning, a hand-addressed envelope appeared in their mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single torn page from Liam's essay, the line "Freedom never knocked on our doors," circled in red ink. Underneath it, "It shouldn't have." Liam said nothing. But something behind his ribs began to shift. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. This wasn't about disagreement anymore. This was hate clawing its way into his real life. Hate that now had his name, his face, his home. 3 days later it escalated. The school intercom crackled during second period. Everyone remain in classrooms, until further notice. This is a lockdown. Chairs scraped. Phones buzzed. Students exchanged wide-eyed glances, As rumors spread like wildfire, an anonymous bomb threat had been phoned into the school office. The voice had been distorted, robotic. The threat was vague, but specific enough to trigger emergency protocol. Liam sat frozen in his biology class, eyes fixed on the floor. No one said his name, but everyone looked his way, and he could feel it, the silent implication creeping into the walls. This is happening because of him. The threat turned out to be fake, but the impact wasn't. By that evening, Sherilyn was pacing their living room, her voice shaking with fury and fear. "That's it. You're done. You're not going back." Liam sat on the couch, hands folded, head low. "Mom, I can't. You won't go back," she snapped. "They put a target on you, and I'm not going to bury my son, because a school can't protect him." "If I stop now," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm, "what was the point of writing it?" Sherilyn froze. She looked at him for a long time, really looked at him. The boy who had once carried feathers in his pocket and ran barefoot through the dust, now sat taller, heavier, sharpened by fire. Her shoulders slumped. "You sound like your grandfather," she whispered. That night, another message came, this time through Instagram DMs. No name. Just a screenshot of his house from Google Maps with the caption, "Bet your res won't protect you forever." Sherilyn sent it to the local sheriff. But there was little they could do. "It's likely a hoax," they said. No direct threat. But Liam knew better. When people are taught that your voice is dangerous, it only takes one to believe they're a hero for silencing it. Still, Liam returned to school the next morning. He walked through the front entrance like a soldier in enemy territory. No hoodie, no sunglasses, no fear showing, even if it sat heavy on his chest. The hallway went quiet the moment he stepped inside. Some students parted instinctively, making a narrow path. Others clapped softly, respectfully. A few stared with open resentment. One girl muttered, "He brought this on himself." Another said, "He's brave," barely audible. Liam kept walking, eyes forward, every step louder than the last. A poster for the school dance fluttered on the wall as he passed. "Unity Week. All are welcome." The irony burned. As he reached his locker, still stained with faint marker smudges, he saw something new. A folded piece of paper taped gently to the top. He paused, heart thudding, and opened it slowly. "Don't stop. You speak for more than you know." It wasn't signed, but it changed something. For the first time in days, Liam smiled. Later that afternoon, Elijah's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. East Coast area code. He handed it to Liam, who hesitated before answering. "Hello? Is this Liam Talbert?" a woman's voice asked, warm but professional. "This is River Press Publishing. We'd like to offer you a book deal." Liam's eyes widened. "A book?" "Yes. Your essay has become part of a national conversation. We want to help you expand it. Tell your full story. Turn it into a memoir, a movement, whatever you want it to be. We'll assign a mentor, an editor, a full team." He didn't respond at first. How could he? A week ago, he'd been called a failure. Now he was being offered a platform most authors only dream of. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," the woman replied. "But I'll be honest, this kind of opportunity doesn't wait long. The world is listening, Liam. What are you going to say?" As Liam hung up, Elijah's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. A voicemail this time. He played it on speaker. It was a man's voice. Low, direct, measured. "Good afternoon. This is Governor Brad Sutherland. I've been following the events surrounding Mr. Talbert. I'd like to schedule a private meeting. Call me back at your earliest convenience." Sherilyn's mouth fell open. Elijah blinked. Liam just stood there, phone in hand, unsure whether the weight pressing down on him was pride or pressure or both. The next morning, a new headline greeted them. "Governor Sutherland faces pressure over meeting with anti-American student." And beneath it a leaked photo of Liam walking into school, circulated by a right-wing blog with the caption, "The kid they want to make a hero." The governor's office was nothing like Liam imagined. It wasn't majestic or cold, like in the movies. It felt quiet, clean, and curated. The polished wood floors, the minimalist decor, the framed photos of ribbon cuttings and ranch visits on the walls. It all screamed control. Liam sat between Sherilyn and Elijah, in a long hallway outside the private conference room, his palms damp against his jeans. He could hear faint murmurs through the door, political voices, fine-tuned to avoid saying too much. Every minute that passed thickened the silence around him. When the door finally opened, a smiling woman in a navy blue blazer stepped out. "Mr. Tallbear," she said, extending her hand. "The governor is ready for you." Sherilyn stood with her son, her eyes sharp, protective, but the aide quickly added, "He's asked for Liam to come in alone, just for the first part. Don't worry, this is informal." Sherilyn's lips pressed into a line, but she nodded. Liam gave her a small, uncertain smile before following the woman inside. Governor Brad Sutherland stood at the far end of a long oak table, all silver hair and practiced warmth. "Liam," he said, striding forward. "It's a pleasure." His grip was firm, his eyes alert. "You've caused quite a stir." Liam offered a nod. "I didn't mean to stir anything. I just wrote what I knew." The governor chuckled. "That's what makes it powerful." They sat, water was poured. Cameras were notably absent. Sutherland leaned forward, elbows on the table. "First, let me say this. I admire your courage. I really do. We need young people who speak up. And your story, it's resonated far beyond your hometown. It's opened conversations." Liam shifted in his seat. He wasn't sure if this was praise or prelude. "But," the governor continued, the smile never leaving his face, "as a public servant, I also have to think about unity. About how messages are received across all communities. Some of your language, understandably raw, has been interpreted as divisive." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like fog. "So I'd like to make a proposal." Liam tilted his head slightly. "We've spoken with a few educational partners," Sutherland said, placing a crisp folder on the table, "and we're prepared to offer you a full scholarship to any in-state university of your choosing. All expenses covered." Liam blinked. "What's the catch?" Sutherland's smile grew tighter. "No catch, just a small condition. That going forward, you present your story in a way that brings people together. A message of progress, not pain. You're talented, and with the right framing, you could inspire without alienating." The words struck like a stone against stained glass. Liam stared at the folder, then back at the governor. "You want me to tone it down? We want you to be heard by everyone, not just the ones who already agree with you." "I didn't write the essay to be agreeable," Liam replied. His voice had dropped an octave. "I wrote it because we're still being erased. Because my people are still fighting for space in a story that pretends we don't exist." Sutherland held up a hand, placating. "I'm not asking you to lie. Just to soften the edges. We need hope, Liam. Especially in times like these." Liam stared at him, at the man who had built a career out of saying the right thing while standing on centuries of the wrong ones. "Hope doesn't come from silence," he said. "It comes from truth, even when it's sharp." For the first time, Sutherland's expression shifted. The smile faded, replaced by something cooler. Calculating. "Well," he said, sliding the folder back toward himself, "the offer stands. But timing is everything. And if you want allies in power, you have to understand how power listens." Liam stood. "If I have to rewrite my pain to make it palatable, then I'd rather not be heard at all." He walked out of the room before the governor could respond. Back in the hallway, Sherilyn stood up immediately, searching his face. "What did he say?" Liam shook his head. "He wanted my truth, just not the version that makes them uncomfortable." Elijah muttered under his breath. "Typical." They left the building with nothing in hand, but with something unspoken burning between them. Liam had refused the deal, but the consequences of that refusal hadn't even begun to unfold. Later that night, as rain drizzled against the windows of their home, Liam sat at the kitchen table, with his laptop open, rereading the original essay. Line after line, he felt the same fire he did when he first wrote it. He hadn't exaggerated. He hadn't raged without cause. He'd simply told the truth, and that had been enough to scare those in charge. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Check your email. It's time people know who she really is." He frowned, confused, but followed the instruction. An anonymous Gmail account had sent him a screenshot, an internal email dated from 2 years prior. The subject: grading standards for difficult submissions. The sender? Caroline West. The body was brief, cold, blunt. Students who choose to submit racially or culturally charged narratives often do so as a means of excusing academic weaknesses. Please keep grading consistent. If needed, fail them to reinforce structure expectations. Attached were similar emails. Other teachers responding. Some hesitated. One replied, This feels targeted toward native kids. Another, should we be failing based on tone? Caroline had replied, emotions don't get as. Structure does. Liam sat back, breath caught in his throat. She hadn't just failed him. She had systemically undermined students who dared to speak their truth. Elijah stepped into the room, reading over Liam's shoulder. Who sent this? He asked. But Liam didn't answer, because at that very moment, a second message popped up. Subject: there's more. She kept files. Buddy, she's not the only one. The files came in batches: PDFs, email chains, digital spreadsheets, all funneled from the same anonymous source over a span of 2 days. Liam barely slept, combing through the documents late into the night, while Elijah and Sherilyn sat beside him, stunned into silence. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Over 6 years, Mrs. Caroline West had failed nearly 72% of Indigenous students who submitted essays or projects centered on their heritage, trauma, or reservation life. In stark contrast, non-Indigenous students received far higher grades, even when their work veered into emotional territory. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was the language in her grading notes. Too subjective. Too angry. This reads like a rant. Borderline academic. In one comment she even wrote, if your people focused on solutions, maybe these stories wouldn't be so bleak. Liam felt something break in him as he read that line. Not like a snap, more like a thread being slowly pulled loose from everything he thought he could endure. She's been doing this for years, he whispered. Elijah leaned in, jaw clenched, and they let her. Sherilyn picked up her phone without hesitation and called a name Liam hadn't heard in a while. Missy Little Elk, one of her former students and now a journalist working with a national investigative unit. Sherilyn's voice, low and purposeful, explained the files. Missy didn't even hesitate. Send me everything. This needs daylight. The storm came within the week. On a Tuesday night broadcast, Truth Unveiled, a nationally syndicated investigative journalism show, aired a 20-minute segment titled Grading Bias, The Hidden Gatekeepers in America's Classrooms. The centerpiece of the episode, MacArthur High School, Caroline West, and a damning paper trail of systemic erasure hiding in plain sight. Former students appeared on camera. Their faces blurred, their names altered, but their stories were the same. A sophomore whose essay about the Lakota ghost dance was returned with a D- and a note, romanticizing trauma is not educational. A senior who wrote about boarding school atrocities and was told her tone lacked patriotism. Even a middle schooler, who submitted a poem about powwows and was accused of glorifying tribalism. Liam watched the segment with his mom, heart pounding. This isn't just her, he said softly. This is every teacher who thinks our truth is too much. Sherilyn nodded, eyes glassy. But she made herself the example. The fallout was immediate. Local newspapers picked up the story. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Jing Grading Bias, We Were Failed, and Voiceless No More resurfaced with new urgency. Anonymous teachers at MacArthur High began leaking additional evidence. Internal policies encouraging academic neutrality that disproportionately flagged cultural narratives as non-standard. The school district's response was late and half-hearted. At first they issued a vague statement about reviewing grading policies. Then, after the public pressure crescendoed, they announced a formal investigation, but with no mention of Mrs. West by name. That changed within 48 hours. Under mounting pressure, the district placed Caroline West on administrative leave, pending investigation. They framed it as a non-disciplinary measure, but the message was clear: they couldn't protect her anymore. Liam read the headline in stunned silence. He had started this with a pen. A story. A truth everyone told him was too much. And now the woman who failed him for being angry was being publicly examined for the same rage she tried to silence. But the next message would take things even further. It came from the State Department of Education, signed by the board president. The subject line hit like a drumbeat in Liam's chest. Request for testimony. State Education Board hearing on racial bias in grading. They wanted him to speak, to testify, on record, on behalf of every student who had been failed, not by their writing, but by a system that didn't want to read them. Liam stood in the living room, holding the letter, breath shallow. Sherilyn put a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. You don't have to do this, she said. You've already done more than enough. But Liam shook his head slowly. No, this is the part where we don't stop. This is where the story doesn't fade. Elijah looked up from the couch, a small smile forming. You're not just telling the truth anymore, you're changing it. But that night, as Liam sat back at his same desk with the peeling wood and pen marks and memories, he found himself staring at the same sentence he'd written weeks before. Freedom never knocked on our doors, it just walked past. Only now he was beginning to realize, maybe for the first time, that sometimes you had to build the door yourself. Just as he closed his laptop, a new message notification lit up his phone. It was from a private server, no name. Just a file attachment and a subject line, confidential. For Liam Tallbear only. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a screenshot of a student gradebook from MacArthur High. Several names, dates, letter grades. In the margins, color-coded notes, red tags for non-conforming, blue tags for emotional, green tags for acceptable structure. Beside Liam's name, marked for monitoring. Below it,
This one's becoming a problem.
initialed, C. Liam stared at the screen, his heart pounding. She hadn't just failed them. She'd flagged them, targeted them. And just as Liam began to process what he was seeing, another name caught his eye on the list. One marked in red with the word escalated.
The name?
Elijah Tallbear. The school board building had never seen this many bodies packed into its narrow hallways. Cars lined the street outside, news vans idled with satellite dishes pointed skyward, and microphones bristled at the entrance like antennas hungry for scandal. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed over the heads of teachers, students, parents, reporters, and protesters. Handwritten signs were taped to folding chairs. "We stand with Liam" sat just 2 rows behind. West was right. Even the air seemed divided. One breath sympathy, the next suspicion. At the front of the room, 7 board members sat in a stiff row behind a long table. Their expressions were unreadable, somewhere between corporate diplomacy and personal discomfort. A placard read, "Hearing on allegations of grading discrimination at MacArthur High." But everyone knew this wasn't just a hearing, it was a reckoning. Sherilyn sat next to Liam in the front row, her fingers clenched around the ends of her shawl. Elijah stood behind them, arms crossed, his jaw tight. Ever since they saw his name marked escalated in Mrs. West's secret gradebook, he'd been quieter but angrier, more watchful. Liam, dressed in a pressed button-down and black jeans, held a folded copy of his essay in his hands like a relic, creased, worn, but still whole. When Mrs. West entered, whispers flooded the room like a wave. She didn't wear her usual blouse and blazer combo, but instead a plain gray dress. No makeup, no smile. Her lawyer followed closely behind, placing a stack of files on the desk beside her like armor. The board chair cleared her throat and began. "Today we hear formal testimonies regarding allegations of racially discriminatory grading practices, with specific focus on classroom conduct, evaluation language, and historic patterns." First came the teachers. A middle-aged history teacher spoke shakily. "I worked with Caroline for 6 years. He paused, swallowing. "I ignored the patterns. I just thought maybe, I don't know. She was stricter with certain topics. I never said anything. I should have." Another teacher, younger, with trembling hands, couldn't even look at Liam as she admitted. "I was told not to rock the boat. I regret that now." Then came a teacher who stood in Mrs. West's defense. Caroline demanded rigor. "Yes, but calling that racism is a stretch. We have policies, standards. If we allow students to inject emotion into every assignment, where does it end?" The tension in the room grew dense. 2 teachers applauded quietly. Someone else muttered, "You're still missing the point." Then the board chair called Liam. He stood slowly, unfolding his essay, as if unfolding his body. He walked up to the podium, placed the paper in front of him, and looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of eyes. Most unfamiliar, many hostile, some quietly hopeful. His voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "I wrote an essay about freedom because I didn't think I had any." He paused. "I didn't write it to go viral. I wrote it because my history, my family's pain, wasn't in the curriculum. So I made it the curriculum. A beat. And for that, I was failed." The room was pin-drop quiet. My teacher didn't just critique grammar. She dismissed my experience. She told me that rage doesn't belong in school. But if we can't talk about the rage that comes from being erased, then school isn't education. It's a muzzle. His voice shook then. Just once. He looked down, then back up. "Do you know what it feels like to be told your voice is too loud when it's the first time anyone's heard you? To be punished for making people uncomfortable when all you've ever been is uncomfortable. A tear slipped from Sherilyn's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I didn't need an A, Liam said, more quietly now. I just needed to be seen. He stepped down. The room didn't erupt. It didn't applaud. It just absorbed him. His words, his presence, like it didn't know how to respond. The board members exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they began asking questions about policies, emails, intent. Mrs. West's lawyer objected, citing procedural bias. The board ignored him. Then it was her turn. Mrs. West did not stand. She spoke into the mic from her seat, lips thin, voice measured. I have taught for over 2 decades. My record has never been questioned. I've graded thousands of essays, some good, some not. She looked at Liam briefly, then away. If students feel unheard, I regret that. But we must also be careful not to demonize teachers who enforce standards. Her words were wrapped in formalities, but the guilt behind them was harder to conceal. She didn't deny the emails. She didn't challenge the statistics. She just buried herself in language like sandbags before a storm. The board chair took notes. The crowd murmured. No decision would be made today. That would come in the following weeks. But everyone knew the verdict had already been rendered, in the hearts of those watching. The hearing adjourned. As people began to shuffle out, Liam remained seated, still holding the paper in his hand. That's when a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped toward him. Mrs. West's lawyer. He handed Liam a cream-colored envelope, sealed and handwritten. She asked me to give this to you. She said she's not ready to speak, but she wanted you to have it. Liam hesitated, then took the envelope. Back at home, with Sherilyn and Elijah nearby, he sat on the edge of his bed and opened it. The letter inside was written in a tight, slanted cursive. He read it once in silence. Then again, it began formally, then unraveled. Liam, I failed you before I ever read your paper. Not because of what you wrote, but because I was taught to mistrust where it came from. I was taught that emotion clouded reason, that tradition was not modern enough, that when Indigenous students wrote from pain, it wasn't literature, it was grievance. You weren't my first, and I am ashamed of that. The letter continued, line after line, not a justification but a confession, a quiet undoing of a lifetime of bias, carried as professionalism. Liam reached the final line. You were right. Freedom walked past you, and I let it. As Liam folded the letter, Elijah's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up, reading the notification aloud, his voice dry and stunned. West just resigned from the school system entirely. But her file, it's missing. Liam read the letter a 3rd time that night, the paper limp from the sweat of his fingertips. The handwriting grew shakier as the paragraphs progressed, as if Mrs. West had lost control of her own confessions. Her words weren't defensive or dramatic. They were disturbingly calm, almost clinical, and that made them harder to stomach. I grew up in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, she wrote, where my father kept a rifle above the fireplace and a signed portrait of President Nixon on the wall. He never said the word native, only savage. That was the word I heard before I could spell my own name. Liam paused, his throat tightening. Sherilyn sat beside him on the edge of the bed, watching him read. Elijah leaned against the wall, arms folded, brow furrowed. No one spoke. He used to say education would soften the tribalness out of them. He called it polishing. I never questioned that. When I became a teacher, I thought I was helping, but I realize now, I didn't want Native students to succeed. I wanted them to comply. The honesty in the letter made Liam's skin crawl. It wasn't cartoon racism. It was the quiet kind. The kind that shakes your hand and smiles as it erases you. The kind that signs your report card and calls it preparation. The kind that looks shocked when you speak eloquently and whispers later, he's well spoken for one of them. Liam set the letter down. She didn't hate us, he said quietly. She feared us. Sherilyn looked over. Feared what? Liam stared at nothing. That we were smarter than they taught her we could be. The next part of the letter dug even deeper into the bones of bias. When you turned in that essay, I didn't read it for content. I scanned it for compliance. When I saw pain, I saw disruption. When I saw truth, I saw threat. And I was afraid you'd expose something I didn't even know I was hiding. I never realized how tightly I gripped control until someone dared to loosen it. Liam exhaled sharply. She was never grading me. She was grading her own discomfort. For the first time, Elijah's voice broke through the quiet. So now what? She confesses. disappears, and the district just wipes its hands? It was a fair question. The resignation came without public apology. Her personnel file had mysteriously disappeared, conveniently just before a group of civil rights attorneys requested it through FOIA. No disciplinary record, no explanation, just erased. As though none of it ever happened. They'll move her somewhere else, Sherilyn said bitterly. Different town, different name. Start over clean while we carry the stains. Liam nodded slowly. She gets to leave the system, but we still live in it. The conversation hung in the air like smoke. But there was no resolution, just the strange ache of understanding something too late. What disturbed Liam most wasn't the hatred. It was the subtle, unexamined indoctrination. The way a woman could believe she was helping while participating in erasure. The way she thought failure was fairness, and silence was structure. He thought back to every comment she'd ever made. The tone remarks, the dismissals, the push to rewrite his essay with perspective. Now he saw it for what it was, a fear of native autonomy, a fear of students who weren't afraid to speak in full voice, with full history. She didn't want us to be brilliant, Liam murmured. She wanted us to be obedient. Sherilyn's voice cracked. That's always been the fear. Native intelligence. That's the real threat. Not the feathers, not the drums. It's the mind, the memory. And now that memory had gone public. By morning, Liam's essay had been quoted in a Senate subcommittee debate. News outlets ran follow-ups on the district's cover-up. The leaked grading statistics were being analyzed by watchdog groups and civil rights lawyers. And Liam's story, once buried beneath red ink, had become a national symbol of student resistance. Still, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure. Emails poured in, some praising, some threatening, some begging him to speak at schools or join panels, or sit for interviews. But all Liam wanted, desperately, was a day to be 17 again. A day where his worth wasn't tied to how eloquently he could bleed onto paper. A day where he could be brilliant without being endangered. But that would have to wait. Because just after lunch, an email arrived from the U.S. Department of Education. Subject: National Curriculum Equity Initiative. Youth Advisory Invite. Body: Mr. Liam Tallbear. We are assembling a Youth Advisory Committee for our National Curriculum Reform Initiative. Your voice has already reshaped discourse. We'd be honored if you joined our leadership roundtable to help draft new policies on inclusive history, representation, and grading equity across all states. Travel and accommodations covered. A formal letter and agenda will follow. Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education. Liam stared at the screen, his fingers hovering. Elijah looked over his shoulder. What is it now? Liam turned the screen toward him. Sherilyn gasped softly. They want you to help change the system. Liam didn't smile. Not right away. He looked back down at the letter from Mrs. West, now folded neatly in his pocket. She feared native intelligence, he said slowly, and now they're asking it to write the rules. Just as he hit reply, a new message appeared, marked urgent from a private server. Don't trust the committee. They're not telling you everything. The plane's wheels lifted off the tarmac with a rumble that vibrated up through Liam's seat, but he barely noticed. His fingers were wrapped tightly around the armrest, not from fear of flying, but from the weight of everything the past weeks had carried. Across the aisle, Sherilyn rested her head against the window, eyes closed, lips moving silently in prayer. Elijah, headphones in, tapped on his phone, scrolling through headlines that all shared a common name: Liam Tallbear. Washington, D.C. was the destination. The White House was not. But it might as well have been. The National Youth Equity Summit was hosted in a sleek building just blocks from Capitol Hill, filled with glass walls and round tables where teens in sneakers and sharp minds reshaped national conversation. Liam had been invited to speak not just as a guest, but as a policy consultant. The boy who'd once been told his voice was too angry now had a name tag that read advisory member. The room was filled with youth leaders from all across the country. Black girls who fought to get natural hair policies changed. Trans boys who had sued their school boards for bathroom access. Indigenous teens like Liam who had seen their history carved out of every textbook and replaced with myth. He met Maya Alston, a 16-year-old from Detroit, who'd turned a police assault into a federal lawsuit. He shook hands with Jonas Reyes, a DACA recipient organizing bilingual curriculum reform in Arizona. When Liam introduced himself, Maya's eyes widened. "You're the Freedom Essay kid?" she asked. "Man, we've been quoting you in every workshop I'm in." Liam smiled, half awkward, half astonished. I didn't think anyone outside my town even read it. Not only did we read it, Jonas added, we assigned it. Your essay's in my school now. Required reading for all juniors. Liam blinked. It is? He wasn't prepared for that kind of reach. Later that afternoon, the Department of Education arranged a live panel broadcast across the country. Liam was seated beside 3 other teens, his hands sweating under the studio lights. The host, a well-known CNN anchor, welcomed viewers and turned to Liam first. You've been called the most important youth voice of the decade, she said. When you wrote your essay, did you know it would come to this? Liam looked straight into the camera, voice low but steady. No. I wrote it because I didn't think anyone would ever ask me. The room fell silent. Even the host blinked slower. I didn't write it to start a protest or make the news. I wrote it because my classroom made me feel like my story didn't count. And if my story didn't count, maybe my life didn't either. That line circled the globe by nightfall. By the end of the week, the essay that had once earned him an F was now being integrated into public school curriculums across 17 states. The Department of Education launched a nationwide training series titled Grading Without Bias, featuring excerpts of Liam's writing. Teachers were required to complete reflection units. Parent organizations hosted community screenings of his panel. He had gone from exile to influence, and yet not once did Liam feel victory. It wasn't bitterness. He didn't need revenge. But there was something uncomfortable about how quickly the same institutions that had failed him now wanted to hold him up as a symbol of reform. His face was being used to patch a system still leaking harm. Sherilyn noticed it too. You don't have to say yes to everyone, she told him one night in the hotel. They want your story but not all of your truth. Keep some of that for yourself. He nodded, grateful. Even here, at the peak of visibility, his mom's words felt like a drumbeat, grounding him in something real. On the last night of the summit, the advisory board presented their proposal: a national database tracking racial grading disparities, a student hotline for academic discrimination, and a cultural sensitivity framework for teacher training. Liam's name was printed on the front page. They asked him to close the session. He stepped up to the mic in a navy button-up and clean braids, looking nothing like the trembling boy from room 24, but everything like the truth that had never fit within its walls. I don't want to be the last voice like mine you hear, he said. I want to be the first of 1,000 more you finally listen to. The room erupted in applause. But Liam didn't smile. He just nodded, then stepped down, handing the mic to the next voice behind him.
The flight home was quiet.
Sherilyn dozed lightly. Elijah stared out the window, one foot tapping to a rhythm only he could hear. Liam sat in the aisle seat, earbuds in, trying to block out the drone of the engine and the endless questions in his own mind. He opened the in-flight magazine, hoping to distract himself, but his breath caught in his throat as the screen above each seat switched to breaking news. The headline was simple, but it hit like a slap. Former MacArthur High teacher files $5 million wrongful termination suit. The screen cut to an image of Caroline West, flanked by her lawyer. She was wearing a tailored blazer now, her face calm and unbothered, speaking into a row of microphones. I was forced out by a political agenda, she said. I was made a scapegoat for a national hysteria. My career was sacrificed on the altar of outrage. Liam's stomach flipped. The camera zoomed in on a court document being passed to reporters. The lawsuit blamed targeted media attacks, digital defamation, and student-led harassment. But the boldest claim sat at the top. Plaintiff asserts emotional damages due to institutional betrayal, racial scapegoating, and weaponized storytelling. Weaponized storytelling. As if Liam's voice was the crime, Elijah leaned over. She's turning herself into the victim. Liam didn't speak. He couldn't. The overhead lights hummed on. The plane continued west, and the boy they once failed now watched his truth become someone else's lawsuit. Just before landing, Liam's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. One line. You weren't the only one she buried. There's more you need to see. By the time Liam stepped off the plane and onto the cracked concrete of the Pine Ridge tarmac, the lawsuit had already gone viral. News crews waited outside the reservation line like wolves, but Sherilyn ushered him quickly into Elijah's truck before the first mic could breach the window. Still, Liam caught the questions being shouted behind him. Do you think you ruined her career? Do you feel responsible for Mrs. West's emotional damage? Is this a case of cancel culture gone too far? They didn't ask about his essay. They didn't ask about the students she failed, or the grading policy that punished pain. They only asked about her. Sherilyn drove in silence. Elijah scrolled through his phone in the passenger seat. His jaw clenched. Liam sat in the back watching the dry hills roll past, his reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost. He hadn't said much since seeing the headline mid-flight, but the questions had been gnawing at him for hours. What if they were right? Not about his truth, but about the cost of it. The town was on fire again, but this time not with protests or rallies, or signs of support. It was fractured, cleanly, and bitterly. On social media, local parents posted long paragraphs defending Mrs. West. They shared old pictures of her at school events, hugging students, handing out awards. The comments beneath those posts dripped with venom. That boy destroyed a good woman. She gave him structure, and he turned it into a sob story. The school was bullied into submission by a kid with a chip on his shoulder. At MacArthur High, teachers were split. Some remained silent. Others reposted Caroline West's lawsuit statement, which read like a final dagger. I was not fired for misconduct. I was sacrificed. Mob pressure. Viral hysteria. I became the villain in a story designed to make a child into a hero. I am not a racist. I am a teacher who was destroyed by a system desperate to prove it could evolve. She didn't name Leah. She didn't have to. Hate mail resumed that night. Dozens of emails, anonymous messages, and even 2 postcards sent directly to the school's general delivery. One bore a Confederate flag sticker, and the words "still playing the victim." Another simply read, "You cost her her life." Liam read them all without flinching, but Sherilyn tore them into pieces the moment they reached the kitchen table. She didn't lose her life. She snapped. She lost a job. You nearly lost everything. But Liam didn't answer, because somewhere deep inside him, a doubt was taking root. Not about what he wrote, but whether writing it had been worth all this. He couldn't walk through his town without stares. He couldn't attend school without whispers. He couldn't check his phone without seeing his name used like a headline in someone else's war. That night he went to bed early, exhausted but unable to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes he saw Mrs. West's calm face on that broadcast, sitting beside her lawyer claiming that his truth had ruined her peace. The next morning he stayed in bed long after sunrise. He didn't want to check his phone, didn't want to face the noise. For the first time since the essay went viral, he wanted it all to disappear. The praise, the pain, the platform, all of it. Elijah entered the room without knocking, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, he's here," he said into the receiver. "One sec." He handed the phone to Liam, face unreadable. "It's Google." Liam sat up slowly. "What?" Elijah nodded. "Take it." Liam held the phone to his ear. "Hello?" A warm, upbeat voice greeted him. "Liam Tallbear? Hi. This is Renee Myers from Google's Narrative and Impact team. We've been following your journey, and we wanted to propose something." Liam sat upright now. "Okay. We're in development for a youth short film series called Voices They Tried to Silence. We'd like to adapt your essay into a scripted short. Fully funded. National release. You'd have full creative input, script approval, everything." He blinked. "You want to turn my essay into a film?" "Yes. We think your voice should be heard on screen. And not just as a news story, as art. We want to show the truth, the classroom, the tension, the decision to post it. Your world. From your eye." Liam leaned back, the weight in his chest shifting. "And you're sure?" "Absolutely," Renee said. "We don't want to tell your story. We want you to tell it with us." He didn't answer right away. He looked around his room, at the essay still taped above his desk, at the letter from Mrs. West folded in his drawer, at the fading marker line where protest signs once leaned. Everything was still here, and maybe that was the point. He had told the truth, and yes, it had disrupted the world around him. But maybe that was what truth was meant to do. Maybe the fight had felt unbearable not because it wasn't worth it, but because it was. Elijah sat beside him now, watching carefully. "You gonna do it?" Liam looked up, and nodded. "I'll do it," he said into the phone. "But I don't want to be a symbol. I want to be the full story." Renee laughed softly. "That's exactly what we want." As he hung up, another notification buzzed across his screen, an email from a name he hadn't seen before. Subject: "My name is Ava. I'm her daughter. Body: we need to talk about what my mother did before she left." The film set was a surreal thing, part memory, part illusion. Liam stood behind the director's monitor on a cloudless California morning, watching an actor in braided hair and a faded hoodie sit at a replica of his old bedroom desk. The details were uncanny. The smudge of ink on the notepad, the cracked window with duct tape on the corners, even the same crooked bookshelf his uncle had built when he was 10. The scene played out with haunting accuracy. The actor playing Liam scratched words into the notebook as a voiceover read the line that had sparked it all. Freedom never knocked on our doors, it just walked past. Liam didn't realize he was holding his breath until Sherilyn placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. It's strange, she whispered. Seeing your life staged like a play. He nodded. It feels like watching someone open your chest and read it out loud. The short film, titled Marked for Silence, was in post-production, backed by Google, co-produced by a native-owned media house, and already generating early Oscar buzz in short documentary circles. But Liam wasn't chasing awards. What moved him was what came next. Within months he was invited to reservations, schools and youth writing retreats across the country. He wasn't just a symbol anymore. He was a mentor, a 17-year-old guiding 14-year-olds through their own truths. In Montana, a young Blackfoot student wrote about being called Featherhead in class. In Oklahoma, a Muskogee teen penned a poem about her grandmother's boarding school scars. Liam read each submission with care, writing margin notes like, "Don't hold back here, or your rage is sacred too." He no longer feared the power of his own words. He taught others to wield theirs. The book followed not long after. Titled Voiceless No More, it was part memoir, part essay collection, part annotated curriculum guide. Liam included not just his original essay, but chapters on the backlash, the system's manipulation, the silence of teachers, and the fire that followed. He included scanned hate mail, redacted grading rubrics, and one page from Mrs. West's letter, marked with a single sentence in bold, "I failed what I feared." The book hit the New York Times bestseller list in its second week. It was stocked in high school libraries across the country, placed beside The Hate You Give, stamped, "And I am not your perfect Mexican daughter." Some states banned it, others taught it. Either way, the world could no longer pretend it hadn't been written. Then came MacArthur High. Liam hadn't returned since the hearing. Too many memories soaked into its walls, too many faces burned into corners. But when the principal invited him to a dedication ceremony, Sherilyn urged him to consider. Sometimes, she said, going back doesn't mean going backward. He stood on the football field under a blue tarp shading an unfamiliar object. News cameras buzzed around the edges. Dozens of students lined the bleachers, teachers and staff behind them. Some wore red shirts that read, "Liam was right." Others stood awkwardly, unsure if they were part of history or watching it swallow them. The tarp was pulled. Underneath stood a bronze statue, Liam at his desk, head bowed, pen in hand. The quote on the plaque read, "This time we wrote the ending." He didn't cry, not because it didn't move him, but because crying would have felt like closure, and he wasn't ready to close anything yet. Not while students were still being failed for telling the truth. Not while teachers still mistook compliance for intelligence. Not while the system kept asking students to adjust tone, instead of adjusting itself. After the ceremony, Elijah clapped him on the back. "A statue, huh?" He grinned. "You're gonna need sunglasses and security soon." Liam laughed quietly. "I just wanted someone to read it." Later that night, they returned home to the reservation. The air felt still, calm. The prairie was dark, but the stars were loud, glittering in infinite defiance. Liam dropped his bag at the doorway and headed toward his room, already thinking about the next chapter he needed to finish for the second book. But as he opened the door, he stopped. Something sat on his bed. A letter, handwritten, sealed, and on the front, in neat, unfamiliar handwriting.
Liam, from Ava West.
He sat down slowly, palms sweaty. Carefully, he opened it. The paper inside was lined, delicate. The handwriting was almost too neat, like someone had practiced it for hours. "Hi, Liam," it began. "I don't expect you to respond. I wouldn't blame you if you burned this. But I need to say something, because I think you deserve to know the full truth about my mother." Liam's heart skipped. She never told me everything, but she left journals. Dozens, buried in boxes. I only found them after she moved away. She's not just angry because she lost her job. She's angry because she realized how much she'd buried. Not just you. So many others. She kept files, photos, notes on students she felt were at risk for influence. I think she feared being overthrown by the voices she tried to train out of rebellion. The letter paused, then resumed. One entry broke me. It said if I'd just taught them to whisper, I wouldn't be where I am now. Liam's chest tightened. Eva continued. She's in hiding now. Somewhere out west. She changed her number. She watches the news obsessively. Every time you're mentioned, she writes something bitter in her notebook. But I think, deep down, she knows she built the silence you shattered. And maybe that's what haunts her. The final paragraph made his hands shake. I've decided to go into education. I'm studying Native American studies and policy at Oregon State. I want to teach what she tried to erase. I want to be the opposite of what she became. I just wanted you to know that, because even if she never apologized the way you deserved, I will, for her, for all of them. Ava. Liam folded the letter slowly, breath unsteady, only to hear a ping from his phone. A new email. Subject. Request to license essay for National Textbook Inclusion. Urgent. Body. We're ready to make your story standard. Will you allow it? The morning after receiving Ava West's letter, Liam sat on the edge of his bed with it folded neatly in his palm. Outside, a pale dawn stretched over the hills of Pine Ridge, painting the sky in gentle strokes of gold and lavender. He hadn't moved much since the night before. Sleep had come in pieces. His thoughts were stitched together by memory, emotion, and something more complicated, forgiveness. Ava's words looped through his head. She kept files, photos, notes on students she felt were at risk for influence. She's in hiding now, but I think, deep down, she knows she built the silence you shattered. But it wasn't the confession that stuck. It was the final paragraph. Ava's decision to teach, her decision to undo. That morning, Liam did something he hadn't done since the storm began. He walked to the top of Wounded Knee Hill, just outside the edges of the reservation, overlooking the land his ancestors fought and died for. The wind here had a different voice. It wasn't angry, it was ancient and clear. He stood there for a long time before Sherilyn joined him, her hands slipping silently into his. In his other hand, he held his book, Voiceless No More, now in its third reprint, and Ava's letter creased at the edges but whole. Sherilyn stared at the view, the same one she'd grown up with, the same land that had raised generations of tall bears. You know, she whispered, they tried to bury our stories. But here you are, printed, published, played on screens. She turned to him. You changed the ending. Liam didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and unfolded the letter again. This time, it wasn't the parts about Mrs. West that made him pause. It was the part Ava had written in a footnote, almost like an afterthought. She read your essay 3 times before she resigned the lawsuit. I caught her once crying in the kitchen. I'd never seen her cry before. The next day, she emailed 3 of her former Native students to apologize. She didn't post it online. She didn't want a headline. She just said she was sorry. Liam imagined that kitchen, quiet, suburban, sterile. A woman who once circled F on his paper now sitting at a table with his words spread before her like a mirror. He didn't feel joy in that image. Not triumph, but something quieter. Something that could almost be called peace. Ava's final update had come in a follow-up email that morning. She had taken a job in a new district, one that had no formal Native history requirement. She convinced them to let her start one. She called the elective Voices Unheard. Liam's essay was the first assignment. Liam smiled softly. From the bottom of a system that once erased him, a new voice was teaching others not to go silent. He held the letter up, letting the sunlight pass through it. She never got to undo all of it, he said quietly. But maybe Ava will. Sherilyn nodded. She's the aftershock. Sometimes healing doesn't start with the wound. It starts with who tends it. As they stood together, Sherilyn pointed toward the horizon. Do you hear that? Liam closed his eyes. The wind moved through the prairie grass like a breath. Gentle. Persistent. I do, he said. Then he pulled a small recorder from his coat pocket. It was part of the Google short film set to end with a full reading of the essay that started it all. They'd asked him to record it in a studio, but he insisted on doing it here. On the land that bore the weight of every word. He pressed record. And, what does freedom mean to you? To some, it's the sound of doors opening. To us, it's the echo of them closing behind our backs. We were not invited to the American dream. We were warned not to get too close. Our stories are not in your textbooks. Our names are footnotes in someone else's triumph. But we have written in blood, in bone, in silence. And now, finally, in ink, his voice cracked only once. But he didn't stop. They called our pain too political. They called our truth too angry. But we weren't angry. We were honest. We weren't loud. We were never heard. Sherilyn gripped his hand tighter. So we wrote. We wrote because the eraser came before the pen. We wrote because silence was killing us slowly. We wrote because freedom never knocked on our doors. It just walked past. The wind picked up again, brushing against his face like a mother's hand. And then he closed with the words that had come to define the new chapter for his people. This time, our story didn't end in silence. This time, we wrote the ending. He stopped the recording. Sherilyn stepped forward and pressed a kiss to his forehead. You were never voiceless, she said. You were just waiting for the world to listen. They turned to leave the hilltop, but not before Liam looked back once more. At the land, the letter, the silence that now felt less like absence and more like respect. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava. My first day teaching starts tomorrow. I'm opening with your essay. Thank you for giving my mother a chance to change, even if it came late. Liam smiled, tears touching his cheeks for the first time in weeks. He had written an essay, but what he created was a movement. As the screen fades to black, his voice plays over images of native youth riding, speaking, marching, his voice steady, certain, sacred. This time we wrote the ending. They silenced his voice, rewrote his truth, and called it excellence. But the truth fought back, and won. If you believe stories like his deserve to be heard, not hidden, type yes. If you believe in justice,